There are 10 of the ones we hear again and
The
again.
most common ones.
Because it'll be right there accessible. But I have to tell you, I was really impressed with how well it went and how well the retirees felt about the meeting after it was done.
Susan?
And my question is just with regard to that first group, well, and even the teachers will be easier to cover, but where it says the week of September 19th, providers will be in the district office. I assume you're going to send something out that'll
Yep.
say when, where.
As soon as we get the
When you get
video
together.
back, we want
Okay.
to put it all in one communication,
Okay,
so we'll
perfect.
talk
That sounds
sooner
good.
than later.
Okay, thanks.
Item H, board reports, starting with personnel committee, May 14th.
Right. Yeah, we had I thought a very productive, useful meeting the other day. The focus of the meeting was on taking the teacher compensation plan and adapting it and making the necessary changes so that we could deal with the specialists, which are school psychologists and counselors and that whole variety of those persons. I think I really have to commend the meetings that Dan or you and the group had of a variety of each of those specialists, and as well as our district directors who were in the meeting. I think they helped out, did more than help. I think they gave us very good directions on where to go. And the only thing I can do is just hit 2 or 3 of the highlights. It was very clear. One of the questions that we had to get settled was, do we have a teacher compensation plan, and do we have a separate separate compensation plan for all the specialist group? It seemed to be the virtual consensus, if not unanimity, among staff as well as the specialists, that they did not want to be separated. They want to be integrated into the teacher plan. So some of the small editorial changes that you see in the teacher compensation plan, it's still highlighted that way as teacher compensation plan. That probably needs to be adapted too, but so some of the language was changed to being kind of converting it to professional educator and that sort of thing. And then we had to what you also need to know is that the professional standards and rubrics that we use to define the qualifications and areas of excellence for teachers, for master teacher, for example, that we used for categories 4 and presumably 5 will be a part of that as well. There's also a similar Department of Public Instruction rubric for all of the specialists and so forth. So that will be that's incorporated as well. We also reviewed language of whether we would use number points on the Danielson scale, which is a 1 to 4 scale, of whether we would have some kind of average or numbers of 1s, 2s, 3s, or 4s, and I think it was generally felt that this group, I think, reiterated what the Teacher Compensation Committee did earlier, that we did not want to get down to a single number, because we did not want to corrupt the evaluation process, and we did not want to pinpoint a specific number. So we have language like high or exceptional and that sort of thing in there. What that means is going to be largely developed and over time with the evaluators, I believe, and we'll have to monitor that as it goes along. We hope it does not get washed out or it's not used unnecessarily to see what the product of that is. We can't tell that with the first round at all. So when you, the teacher compensation plan that you had has, we're talking really about professional educator, and the editorial changes were made within the plan. The title of the plan should have had the same change to it as well. But so we have the language of high standards and that sort of thing. And there's a little addition of an instructional coach as to one of the leadership positions and so forth. That grew out of the experience which the evaluators have had too. So we benefited from the specialists coming in, I think, with excellent input from our district, all of our 3 district directors on each of that. And so we have such things we have things such as high standards of teaching per fact and professional practices, because obviously the school counselor is not teaching in a literal sense, but there's a professional practice, and but we're still continuing to have administrators do the evaluation process. Evidently, at least it was reported to the committee that teachers at this point feel uncomfortable, or at least do not want to participate in that evaluation process. So just keep in mind that the master teacher standards also have an equivalent, a master specialist standards, so to speak. Specialist covers all of these subgroups and so forth. And those were the changes. We've also clarified a little editorial language that the stipends for advanced degrees like master's and doctorate are additions to the base salary, and that has been done anyway. That was the intent, but it was not clearly clarified and so forth. And the leadership positions are an annual stipend and not a base salary stipend. And let me see, I highlight them in yellow here. And these positions affected are school psychologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, nurse, speech and language pathologists, school counselors, and school social workers. That's the general cluster that we're referring to here. And I let Jennifer speak too, but it's I thought it was a very worthwhile, productive meeting. We raised a lot of questions, and I think that they were adequately answered, and we've set the review times for the teachers and the first round of the school psychologists and the specialist areas and so forth. And I see some of you out there. Thank you all for your contributions to the work committee, the work you did before you came to this committee, and also to Lisa and Nicole and Krista for your contributions in kind of pulling it all together and so forth.
I'll just mention, we also have it as a discussion item, in this case there might be some discussion on the actual drafts, and so we can make sure we go through that here in a minute coming up.
Thank you, but no handouts?
What?
No handouts?
No, my old teacher routine of having handouts, I've been ridiculed enough, my personality's been damaged.
I just have to keep doing it. Yeah. Okay, discussion items, the innovative zone planning team report.
Hi, so I put a little summary in writing for you about what we're doing tonight. So tonight is a presentation, no action to be taken. And as you recall, the last time the board discussed this topic was back in June, where we had talked about some of the preliminary discussions that we had had internally, and that I was recommending that we move forward with a full planning team to do work over the summer to explore further and investigate The possibility, we've talked about the idea of innovation, but specifically with the idea of looking at a potential elementary, or middle charter school. And so tonight is so you can hear the results of the work that the team did over the summer. I don't have an administrative recommendation tonight. We're here to listen to the report. And I was able to attend their last planning meeting, so I don't think I'm going to hear anything I haven't heard already. But an opportunity for the board to not only hear the report and what they've been working on, but also an opportunity to ask questions. And there are a number of questions that you should have, some that will have answers tonight, and others that we wouldn't know unless we continue further study. And then with the idea that we'd come back again the next board agenda in 2 weeks, where I will have a recommendation based upon the report, based upon the feedback of the board tonight, about potential next steps and so on. So that's the purpose of a report. We have a number of team members. I think in the documents that you have, besides a draft executive summary, you do have a list of all the planning team members. The majority of those people are here tonight. I'm not going to go through and introduce everyone, but I will ask that our team introduce themselves, the people that are presenting tonight. So I know we have a number of people that are going to speak. Excuse me, we'll probably have to figure out the best way here to come on up and whether we share the table or not. So.
Okay.
And we diverge upon you. Well, thank you for allowing us this opportunity.
If I could ask, because there's
Okay.
a microphone on that table.
Will this work from
for
here, do you think?
Hopefully, but.
Okay, so thank you. I'm Heather Terrell Stotts, the director of the Innovative Schools Network, and I've had the privilege of working with all of these people behind me, as well as several more this summer. We had a series of both full team and separate task forces meeting in a series of 22 meetings since the last time we saw you as a whole group. So a lot of work has been done in that amount of time, and the group tonight is here to share with you what the process has been, the feedback that we received, and our own thinking about recommendations for next steps.
Okay. So I'm Lynn Munsinger Brown, if you didn't remember from last time. I'm a parent and I served on this committee, and as Dan mentioned, this was, I just want to talk a little bit about the planning team and the configuration of the planning team, and then we'll talk about more detail. So we were set up as the superintendent's planning team, not an ad hoc committee of the board. So however, we did hear the recommendations that you had for the team when we first met back in June. One of those things was a recommendation around transparency. So the meetings were on the Monona Grove calendar, and we did have guests at every meeting who were not part of the official planning team. And so to stay in line with what other planning teams set up by the superintendent might do, we didn't publicize the meetings on social media or other places. So we felt that would really help us to facilitate the meetings themselves and the planning process. And the second thing that you recommended was reports back to the board, and we trust that Dan got those reports back to you. And the third thing was around an FAQ, which you'll hear about more in a minute. So we were a team of 20 people, and we logged over 27 hours together. So I'm from the software industry, so we talk about person hours. That's 540 person hours. 140 hours of that time.
You people are becoming well prepared to serve on a school board.
Right, it's the time in between the meetings did not count in there, so that's an important point there, Dean. It was an 8-week period. We had over, as I say, 140 hours of volunteer time. And the planning committee consisted of 9 teachers, 4 parents, 3 community members, 3 district administrators, a board member, 4 facilitators from ISN, and 2 babies and 1 baby-to-be. And the meetings themselves, as Heather alluded to, looked a lot like the inquiry-led method that we're recommending. We started with big ideas, and we called them bright visions. We donned sunglasses, kind of everything was on the table. And from there, the ISN facilitators kind of corralled us toward the guiding questions like, what will this school look like, how it will be governed, how it will interface with the community and other district schools. And so then we worked in teams to focus on these questions. And we had some norms around sharing perspectives so that every voice and each perspective was valued. So we had teachers sharing their ideas on how they might individualize learning, parents sharing their dreams of how they want school to be for their kids, community members pushing us to reach beyond the typical definition of what a school looks like, or the confines of it anyway, and administrators providing guidance as to how the school might fit into the broader scope of the district. And all along the way, ISM was providing practical advice for taking these ideas to implementation and providing us kind of some real examples about what these bright visions look like in project-based learning schools, specifically elementary, at the elementary age level. So then we shared our findings and research with one another as we worked through this, and we kept the conversation going. We used an online collaboration tool called Slack, and that was really effective, and we hope it will stay up for a long time so that we can continue to read and research those articles.
Yeah. One comment was just posted here, and I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but we figured there are over 200 posts among all of the committee members, over 200 posts with links to amazing resources that we, through our processes of individual work and investigation, posted to Slack to share with one another and to be able to learn from and move on to. And I'm going to very quickly, I hope, and it's going to seem like just a scattershot sort of whirlwind tour, I'm going to kind of go over a quick review of some of the innovative school practices that we have the opportunity to look at, learn from, and discuss amongst the group. We started with visioning and sharing, including Slack, but also a lot of other information and links and resources, touching on work of names of people that you'd probably be familiar with: John Hattie, Alfie Cohn, Sir Ken Robinson. We had the opportunity, I really enjoyed this, to actually have a virtual tour and Q&A with a live online interview with James Murray, who is the Waukesha STEM Academy principal. And he not only was there to answer questions and tell us about kind of the evolution and creation of the school he's leading, but he literally walked around with his phone and showed us portions of the school, how things are currently in the process of changing over the course of the summer. It was a great opportunity. The different areas that we ended up splitting into our task force groups, the curricular structure, the scheduling, the community, and the organizational structure, I should say. There were lots of options out there: Reggio Emilia, Expeditionary Learning, Montessori. We focused and ended up settling on a likely project-based learning as a hands-on, student-driven model that really would give us our best opportunities. The community-based school concept, I'm going to let Jennifer Hedrick, there you are, to sort of speak very briefly to what sort of that resource collection was like.
Yeah, so our community subcommittee explored options within our community, and just the concept of what is a community school. You know, you could take that in many different directions, and so we looked at many different schools across the country, how they are implementing community-based learning. Some of it kind of depends on the school. Very urban schools do it differently than for example, schools more along our socioeconomic makeup. They integrate community partners, be it businesses, be it parents who have expertise. Let's say an engineer, a father or a mother who's an engineer might come in and do some instructing, an architect. They also integrate businesses. They actually go into businesses, and students can learn within the business, can do internships in the business, hands-on learning in these community, or let's say in a nursing home, they can do service projects. They across the country we have schools taking trips to Asia, let's say, for example, and this is a school project with parents, with community members, and it's part of the curriculum. So it's very broad-based, and we looked at the Monona, Cottage Grove, at our area, and all that's possible here, all of the potential community partners we have here, many of whom were on our committee. We had a representative from Aldo Leopold, and from the Waisman Center, and we had a few from Madison College.
The Goodman Community Center.
Yes, and of course, a number of community members' parents. It was really an amazing constellation of the group.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm just gonna keep moving forward to, our organizational committee, subcommittee, looked at potential options for even just ways of scheduling the school, various models and calendar structures, including looking at what different models of year-round schooling, as the term goes, looks like. And that actually varies significantly from district to district across the nation, as well as how would that layer over or fit in with our current structures in the MG district. How would it be for one of our schools to be working on a different schedule model, and how would that overlap for parents perhaps who had students in more than one school? We looked at the aptitudes of staff and teachers who would be a part of this school. We had a huge group visioning and discussion about what we felt teachers who are leading this sort of a school, or working in this sort of a school and leading the students and having the students lead them, what would they need to have in their histories and in their work and in their personalities? How would they need to work with the students? How could we hire them? How would we discover, and how could we support them in their work with the students? I just want to say from a personal perspective that 22 years ago, when I came into the district as a brand new hire, I fell into a situation where there were innovative practices being supported and tried out by individual principals in the buildings. Bill Bryce had already started an interdisciplinary project between science and music and art that I was able to take a part in. Since then, I've been a part of or been privy to instances in this district of learning through drama in the classroom, the Expeditionary Learning Outward Bound School that was formed and ran and fully supported through the district. MG21 as a project-based learning school, not only how it was created, where it derived from, but how it's evolved over the years and how it's grown and what it's become. Mindfulness, school gardens movement, all of these are traditions of, I should say, are a part of the tradition of constant innovation, constant moving forward, and constant looking for ways to grow and improve, that I feel we've always had as part of the flavor and the culture of our district. And I was very pleased to be able to be part of this whole process, which I see as a part of the same process. So that was sort of our, what we all looked at.
We just wanted to explain how the process came to be. We already said that we established some group norms, keep sliding, so that to have the discussion processes, and then that there was the purpose and value and content that we came up with was a result of a group decision. This was not just one person coming in and giving their ideas or a small group of people, but a lot, over 20 some hours of discussion happened to get us to this place, and to look at like reviewing information and just really feeling that we were respecting everyone's opinion. Obviously opinions differ within the group, and so it was those really positive conversations about what we all really want and really what's best for kids, and really encourage that critical thinking and welcoming all ideas into our group.
What was really nice about the process was the difference of opinions that were really thoughtfully worked out, and really beautiful conversations between so many different partners and members of the community and of the MG staff. And so we'll go over it in a minute, but there's so many comments from the planning team of what a rich discussion of a variety of ideas that, you know, they felt such a privilege to be a part of, and I'm including myself in that, and we'll go over it more.
Just a discussion process that even I can take next week, Thursday already, and start in my classroom. You know, no matter what happens with this process, I think all the teachers agreed we learned a lot of things we can take back and do already this year.
Do you guys want to go through it? Do you guys want to just say who you are?
Okay, I'm Sarah Steiny, first grade teacher here in the district.
I'm Kimmy Leanna. I'll give you my new name. I'm getting married in 3 days. And I'm a special ed teacher at Taylor Prairie.
So when we were done with all of this process, we took a survey just as committee members, and it's up here. And so just some feedback, just from the committee members. This was not community or anything else, just the committee members. So 20 people participated, and this is newer than what Heather had sent you. So some of the information may be a little bit different. But just kind of shows you the different task forces we were on. And then based on being part of this, I think it's really important to look at the strongly agree that my knowledge of innovative practices increased, and that's what I just touched on. That even if nothing else comes out of this, that as teachers and parents and community members, that I think we all learned how many other options there are out there than our traditional school model that we're also used to, and that wanting to make changes already is 64% strongly agree. And that recommending that this process continues is at 88%. So really strong numbers there, and wanting to continue to work with ISN was 82%. So we really all felt this was a really positive experience for our summers.
The next part of the survey, if you wouldn't mind clicking, is just a few where the planning team had some opportunities to share some comments, and I won't read them all to you, but I'll pull out a few that are significant. And so this question was, please share the most beneficial aspects of being part of the planning team. And again, one person said exposure to a wide range of curricula and the opportunity to think deeply about the benefits and drawbacks of each was extremely gratifying and boosted my confidence in our ultimate recommendation to the district about next steps. And over and over you'll hear that again, is that the collaboration was was the most really beneficial and enriching part of this process. And then the next question, it said that this is continuing actually. Another person said, I'm able to think critically about various philosophies and methods of teaching. We've explored what is working in education and what isn't, and researched best practices to find ways to reach all students and make their education meaningful. And this is, reiterating that despite what happens in this process, we as educators, and we're already being enriched by this process. We haven't even got to the kids yet, so it's really nice. And moving on, what are your hopes for the next steps in this process? The comments are unanimously, let's move forward and express enthusiasm and excitement about this opportunity, and really taking this and writing it to further enhance the education in the School District. Because as Peter had touched on, this district is, has a history of innovation, and there's just so many things that we as a team have found and uncovered and dug up that we're really excited about to move forward. And another comment said, we hope that we're able to continue in planning and implementing a charter school that will serve the district in more ways than one. And so what I think that really means is this isn't just a school for certain kids, or a school for certain staff, but it's an incubation zone for all of these ideas to kind of disperse their way into other schools in the district. And it's really nice to have a small scale environment to try them out in, see if it works, work out the kinks, and then bring that back to the larger district. So we're always innovating, and we're always, what's next and how can we make this work? It's not just about the staff. Like the staff right now, speaking as one, and Sarah and I too have talked about this so many times, that it's such an amazing experience to have the space and the opportunity to explore all these different options. But wait till we get to the kids, and the comments are so unanimous, and let's move forward and let's do this, and I'm ready to work.
And just touching briefly on the executive summary draft, which you have a link to and perhaps copies to. An executive summary, just as a quick point of reference, an executive summary is actually a required part of any charter, because as a charter is an agreement with the state to run a school in a particular way. An executive summary is basically the outline, the vision and mission and goals and structure of the school. And so the executive summary includes, and I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but basically the main points that we were all working within as we collaborated and sort of visioned what this could be and how it could involve, is to initially educate up to 100 students in grades 4K through 6, and then the following year add grade 7, and the following year after that add grade 8. In innovative and research-based learning experiences that will allow all of the students the opportunity to explore personal values and aspirations and focus on the development of the whole child. So we're looking at prioritizing the intellectual, physical, social, and emotional growth, and a strong sense of community, and that building confidence in teaching independence and interdependence, and preparing students to be engaged citizens in the global world. So the vision of the school, the executive summary basically lays out the vision for a shift in an educational model, so that the goal can be to encourage ingenuity and creativity with real-world hands-on experiences, team skills, individual skills, and giving the students voice and choice in their learning to make it really the most meaningful that it can be, which in turn brings the natural curiosity into a fostering of lifelong learning. When kids understand that they have a role in their own learning, that's what sends them forward with that same mindset. So.
Okay. So, in trying to understand who the school might serve,
I'll do that.
okay, thanks. We surveyed current Monona Grove families. So this survey went out via Infinite Campus. So it's people who are part of the Monona Grove community already, have children enrolled. We had 350 people respond. There were some non-Monona Grove families, so that must be people who live outside, or I'm sorry, they live outside the district. So they're open enrolling or have some other agreement. And there were about 40 families that either found us through the website or heard from a neighbor, and we also sent them, so those would be families who had children younger than school age, or they were attending other schools. But they all of those families were from within the Monona Grove residence area. So the responses, the first several are kind of demographic data, and we actually split this demographic data out a little bit later, so I'll kind of go through these first slides pretty quickly. But you can see we have a pretty good distribution no matter of the ages of the kids as to who's responding in terms of the sizes of those schools and the folks responding. So that was kind of a interesting perspective. Once
Can
we
you go back one slide?
Yeah.
I just want to point something out quickly.
Sure.
Just because we thought it was interesting. I'm stepping over here, so I'm by the microphone. So as a reminder, this went out to families who this year will have 4K kids through 8th grade. And that it's very interesting if you take a look at that data, because
no decisions in that realm, but we certainly explored that as a concept and explored the research around year-round school and in the context of more traditional and charter schools.
yeah, I'll just add to that, going back to the other slide, that we were surprised as an entire group. Certainly I was, as an outsider to the district, and people from within the district, I believe, were really surprised too, to see that 109 respondents said they'd be more likely to send their child to the school if a year-round calendar were adopted. And even more surprising to me, that 40% of the respondents said it would have no impact on their decision to send their child to the school. The theme of the comments that will not surprise you, I think, is that why isn't the whole district looking at year-round schooling? So we're really sorry we opened up that can of worms. But we were
But not
shocked,
really,
we were
yeah,
really,
yeah.
surprised. I mean, and with the slide before that you saw, this example was given, that people could see, so it was really, there aren't dates there. It's just a nice schematic that Peter put together to give people an idea, but we were very surprised, and also, and Krista had mentioned this at the meeting, you know, people aren't surprised to hear about year-round school. They're hearing it more and more out there, and so I don't think it was as much of a shock to people as we thought it might be. But we put it out there because our organization task force was looking at it and thought we better ask people before we start talking about it anymore, so.
Yeah, I think it's actually a great example of sort of the benefit or the outcome of this work, to sort of have that information in front of us that we may or may not have chosen to gather, that's relevant, I think, just for further conversation district-wide as well, and just to, one of those things where we may anticipate a response that was not the response that we got, so.
Let's talk about next steps.
So I think we wanted to talk a little bit more about the community aspect, a little bit more in depth. So Sarah and I think Virginia have a little bit to share about they can introduce themselves and who they are.
I'm gonna make my way up here.
Thank you for that transition.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, I am Sarah Moran, and I am a parent who lives in the district. I have 2 little kids, one who'll be in kindergarten this year, so very exciting. And maybe I'll talk a little bit first about communication, which ties into the community piece. So there's a few things to mention on that. One is that if we're approved to go into the next step of this, we would intend to have a very clear communication plan that we're always communicating with you guys, with the staff in the whole district, with the whole community, to kind of keep people updated on what's happening and to continue to gather their feedback and input as things would be shaped going forward. And then the other piece about communication is that the community is such a strong emphasis in this model that we would continue to reach out and have the community partners involved from the very beginning. So one of those examples is we've had and will continue to have access to a neuroscientist who works with the UW system, and she has, been involved then in helping develop the structure and the model for the school, and she has such an expertise in mindfulness and well-being and resilience, and just is able to help weave that into how the structure is formed, which is different than enlisting somebody later on and starting that communication later once we're farther down the road and trying to sort of impose it on top of the structure. It's just really woven into the fabric of what the school is, which is really wonderful. And so I'll have Virginia talk about this in a minute, but she's also been involved from Aldo Leopold from the very beginning because the nature piece is so important. But we continue to reach out to those partners that really align with what the school model is trying to do to make sure that they're involved in creating this from the beginning, and that communication is that they're just integrated into the planning. And then the last piece about that communication is, again, that the intention is this can be that incubator, and like Kimmy was talking about, for innovative methods, and therefore communication with the rest of the district is critical because we want everybody to be able to benefit from this school if it's approved, and so we can take good, clear communication that has been worked out in this model and as desired and as is appropriate from other schools in the district, that solid communication will enable them to more easily integrate what they want to into the existing schools as it fits and as it makes sense for them. So, and then if you want to talk a little more about being involved from the ground up as a
Sure, yeah. My name is Virginia Wiggin. I'm the Nature Center Director at the Aldo Leopold Nature Center, so I oversee all the education programming there. And we've heard about potentially environmental science-based charter schools and nature-based charter schools in the district for several years. I know I actually looked back on our we renewed our lease from the land. The Aldo Leopold Nature Center leases the land from the city of Monona. If you're not aware of that, we have like a 50-year lease, I think, that we renew. And we recently renewed it in 2010. And in the lease, I was looking back, right, very timely, it says, as part of our lease agreement that we would consult on a potential environmental charter school, which I think that time was like 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And it was really timely that I brought that up and looked at it and said we would, help and consult on their environmental science curriculum. And wow, I never heard that that one was happening, but I'm so excited and happy to serve, and fulfill that obligation. And I'm also really excited about this school. So I think, and I have a handout too that I can kind of pass around to those of you that are interested really on why children spending time outside is important. And I think a lot of the bullet points here you'll see really align well with the real vision of the school. And I think a lot of the visions for the district as well. So I think there are, in addition to science education, there are reduction of stress, decreased social isolation, increased academic performances, improved classroom performances, improved behavior, all of the things that really will lead to this really whole child experience. So I think what we're really excited about, and I'm very proud to say that as a community member, I recognize that Monona Grove schools are already very well recognized within the community. Many of them come and visit us often at the Nature Center, so we love those visits and really are trying to move forward and really excited to move forward to really expand the learning beyond just a day out in the field in those field trips, and what that could look like. And I think once you look at the depth of learning that can happen through a real integrated community-based approach, and whatever the community partner is, whether it's us, whether it's the Boyson Center, whether it's neuroscience, whether it's library partners, how much richness you have in your community that kids can really dig deep into and get that really holistic experience is really exciting to me. So we're excited as a partner right across the world. We'll be happy to work with all of the schools and think you're doing amazing things and think this is another great opportunity.
Well, I'm Rebecca Fox-Blair. I'm the Executive Director of MG21, the district's current charter school that's project-based. And we, as you know, serve students 9 through 12. And so what is exciting about this, and the reason that I sat on this committee this summer, was that the idea of being able to partner with an elementary school and ultimately have a pre-K for 12th grade project-based program for students in this district is really exciting for us. And so, we love the idea about being able to work with younger students as well as, continue our partnerships with, Aldo Leopold and other places and see how we can kind of really make the multi-age, really multi-age. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And I also think when we're talking about, I think Peter was talking about providing support for teachers and things like that, I feel like, we also have that expertise to provide. And so it's not going to be something where we have to go searching for that. We've been doing the project-based thing for the last 7 years, and I feel like, we have that expertise to bring to the table as well.
And not only the expertise, I think, from my perspective, and hopefully, so I know you'll have questions, but just want to share a few, key points sort of from a leadership perspective. And so my interest in serving on the committee and spending the time this summer really came from sort of 2 places. One, from a perspective of, I want to just kind of reflect on some of what Rebecca was saying is my experience with MG21 and learning more about that program over time. And from a student services perspective, my number 1 responsibility is really to, is for all kids and to having a meaningful continuum of options for all kids, but particularly those that are so more traditionally underserved in our current school settings, and to sort of watch the evolution of MG21 and to hear story after story of how that was a fit and to have individual conversations with the high school team, with Rebecca, to really make thoughtful decisions and have that as an option for students has been really eye-opening and something that I thought was worthwhile to consider for you know, an elementary or a middle level programming option. So we've heard a lot of stories from people, our connections that are sort of personal or individualized and meaningful for your individual child or your individual student, and certainly that's how a lot of things start, or conversations start, doors open. That's the perspective that many people come to the table with, but I, you know, was sort of thinking it from more of a systematic point. So who are our students that we have? What options do we have available? What would we like to see more of? And is a charter school option with a project-based focus something that would fit a need in our district-wide? And I think just to hit on a couple of key points, and some of, you know, Lisa has been involved and has hit this point. So, you know, the idea that this is really about innovation, and this opportunity was just that, was an opportunity to begin a conversation. So we could have chose not to have the conversation, or we could have made the decision that we made, which I think you heard from the group was a really powerful opportunity to do what we need to do more of in education, which is to reflect on best practice, have in-depth conversation, have time to invite and include other voices, and really think and be reflective on our practice. But the idea, and just to reinforce, and we've said this before, is that this isn't being proposed as an alternative because our current system is somehow not effective, or that these pieces are not happening in our current schools. When I look at those 4 pillars, every single one of those things, you know, should be happening in our schools, and it is. And we're actually actively working to cultivate more of that and ensure that those pieces are in place. You know, my perspective is more about the how. So project-based learning is the how, and it's not that there isn't project-based learning in our current system, it's a matter of scale, right? So the idea, are we gonna have a place where this can be sort of the 24/7 model, but know that that does occur, and many of the things that you've heard about and will hear about potentially are already occurring in our elementary and middle school settings. And the idea that, you know, do we have a responsibility to sort of embrace and engage innovation? I see this conversation as parallel to the conversations we're having in the district about being thoughtful about how we deliver services to students, being thoughtful about how we individualize learning within our current system. And while we're I feel like there's a place for both pieces. So while we're simultaneously figuring out how to do that better and meet students' needs in even a better way in our current system, here's an opportunity, as others have said, to sort of have that incubator setting where the conversation with the principal from Waukesha was really eye-opening to me, because this is an opportunity to start with the goal in mind, where our charge or our challenge was, don't layer the limitations first. So things like schedules, lunches, busing, we all are very limited in some ways by those pieces that are part of a school system, and they exist and they're important, but this is an opportunity to really build something from the ground up that isn't built with those limitations sort of as the driving factor, and just to sort of see what could that look like and how could that influence our current practice. So, and the other piece, you know, I think it's an opportunity to, you've heard pieces and ideas and you've seen the pillars. Obviously there's more depth and planning and detail to come. I've been a proponent the entire time of thinking about, if we were to design a school that's a good fit for our most vulnerable or our most traditionally underserved learners, a place where they would be served well and learn well, then we would have a school that's a great place for anyone to attend. So I think another consideration is really ensuring that, yes, we have survey data. I think it's the committee's charge to ensure that we're hearing from all voices in our community, and that if we're designing a school in a setting, we're being active and thoughtful about sort of equitable distribution and making sure that there's equal opportunity for all of our students and families to be represented in this setting. So it's very exciting, and I think the group, as you can tell, would love the opportunity to continue the planning and think through some of those details. So, questions for this group?
Questions? Dean?
Well, I sat in on your session, you know, the last session anyway, and I'm going to reflect a little bit. I went to a 7 through 10 junior high school, in Pasadena, California, that is very much like the school that you're providing. When I left that school and went to a traditional high school in grade 11, I had no idea what was physics and what was chemistry, and a lot of those subject matters were hard to deal with. It was all project-based learning. One of the interesting things as I reflect on it, I didn't know this until I got into teacher training, was that there were special ed kids in every other group. We were groups of 5 usually, and the teacher always was coaching the other kids to integrate those special ed kids into the learning process. And basically, when I look back, I didn't really know that was happening until I looked back at it years later. So it can serve all kids, and I can look back and say, I kind of knew what history was and things like that, but it was everything was, you could call it jumbled, and that sort of thing, and it was. I thought it was a great experience, and it socially integrated all of us in the school. We were much more integrated, knowing each other, boys and girls, and there wasn't a lot of different social classes in the school, but it was there. I also lived and worked in Finland, and I worked for 15 years integrating the former Soviet bloc countries in school systems into the Western thing. And in Finland, it was very interesting because I had a 4-year-old boy when we were there, and he went to a school like you're describing. And remember I told you that sitting in on your meeting, it sounded like a Finnish school faculty meeting today. And with the excitement and the exchange and the shared leadership and those kinds of things. And now he was a 4-year-old, so he didn't have much subject matter structure and that sort of thing. But they well integrated him, who came there not knowing the language. They found roles for him and that he could do. He was the centerpiece in their Christmas celebration because they have Santa Claus in Finland called Joulupukki in Finnish, and there's a ceremony where they dance, and they always made him Joulupukki because he didn't know the words to the song. but I saw that integrating my kids, and I've seen it there, and that. So I applaud what I saw, and I congratulate you on how far you've gone now.
Questions? Susan?
I also wanted to really thank you guys for, I came twice and I really enjoyed watching and observing. And then you also, actually I walked into the meeting a little late the other day. Dean said, I attended, yeah, he was speaking from the table. It's like, so, yeah, and having good input, because he has this great experience, but you allowed all that, and you made it a really community-based piece, and I thought that was really neat. The question that continues to be asked, and you kind of touched on it in the FAQs, is the cost. So understanding we don't know what that's going to be, we need to continue to address that because that's one of the major community questions that we continue to be asked. And we kind of talked about this. When that happens, it tends to distract from the work you've done that's so impressive in your objective summary. So if we can just kind of go back at some point in time and get him Dean's direction, he knows all this. This is nothing new. And again, letting me say to you, guys, get the information out. And actually, there was a very clear question of, but why? Did you hear that day? And actually, I think it was Melissa who said, you asked this before, and I think we should try and do this. So I really, really commend you on these pieces that we're seeing tonight. Now I can take them and give them to people instead of sitting at Ken's for 20 minutes and trying to respond to them. So again, this is great. This is a great piece to go.
Can I just make a comment to that? Is that okay?
Heather, of course.
Yes, of course.
That's why you're here.
In the survey, one of the things that we did was that if you still, we had the frequently asked questions document that you've probably all seen. But we also said if you still have questions, email us, and we set up a special email in the district that came to me and to Dan. And we got a total of 8 emails, a very small number. Many were just clarifying things, and a couple were unhappy people asking some questions, but I think, you know, Dan's met with some of those people and engaged them, so I was surprised at the small number of people sort of coming out with more questions after that was put out, and many people very, very happy with the amount of information that was included in the email and the survey. So forgot to mention that in the results, but I wanted to say that when you asked that question.
Jeff?
Okay, how long has MG21 been in?
Be our 7th year.
7th year. Can you,
Under the current charter with the sort of new developed, it was 3 years now?
No, we had a 5-year charter, and then last year was our first year on the new 5-year
First,
charter.
that's right.
So
Okay.
that's, and so this will, yeah.
Okay.
is there anything you've done, and I think you do great work there, that has moved to the high school?
It's different, I guess I would say, it's kind of like, you know, in an elementary model, I think it's more applicable to have those kinds of transfer of ideas, whereas in a high school model, the high school is not set up to kind of fit with our model. So there's, you know, chemistry and literature and, you know, calculus, and there are specific classes that are divided by disciplines. Whereas in our world, everything is integrated, like the jumble that Dean was talking about, and it's all, you know, focused with this project-based lens. And so, yes and no is the answer. I think there are some of our parts and pieces of our model that transfer, like Kristen was talking about, via like student services and some of those programs. But as far as like our curriculum, you know, it is very different than the high schools. Whereas I think in an elementary school model, the elementary model itself is more conducive to that transfer of ideas. And so I think it's a little bit different, is the answer to that question. We'd love to do more though.
Can I add a piece? So one of the things that I've asked that we never have enough time for hearing some of these kinds of things. But one of the things that Rebecca and the students received a grant from the Monona Education Foundation on building leadership. And that model, once it establishes itself in maybe 1 year,
This is our second year.
Second year,
it,
okay.
So
I'm telling you, when you watch that and you hear people talk about that, you say, this model should be brought to the school district in whatever way it can be helpful to other students. It's not that you don't see the leadership and all the other things, especially if you go up to the high school, you see incredible growing and building of leadership. But this was a very specific modeling grant, and they're still kind of getting where it is. So I think when you really look, when we have the opportunity to hear about those kinds of things, which the board, I mean, I heard about it as the liaison on the foundation, and again, Carrie will be able to hear some of the grants. But that's the kind of thing that then touches me in a way that I say, oh my gosh, this is going to be so cool. And so you know, this woman taught in the high school before this program founded, and I'll tell you, she touched a lot of students, including mine, in an incredibly special way. So it's not just about what did you take from this school to this program, it's about what did the teacher who's teaching that teaching process learn, and what can you give back in a way in the teacher mentoring process or whatever. So if we're not seeing that, sometimes it's because we have the blinders and haven't been exposed. And so you asked Rebecca this question, and she was, well, but having heard that piece, I had the opportunity to then say, oh my gosh, yes. And it's a lot of what Paul does at the high school right now, but it's because you've been there and you can feel that.
Jeff, did you have anything else?
Forever, whoever. We talked about business internships that's not really a pre-K through 4 doing business. Somebody talked about business internships earlier.
Business involvement.
Yeah.
Partnerships with businesses.
Right.
We wouldn't necessarily be sending 4K students out.
Right.
Right. Business. You never know.
Right.
It's possible. But more along the lines of having interactions with businesses. Like I know MG21 currently partners with Sector 67 as somebody who comes into the school to work with students, and students are also able to go out to their facility to work there. Aldo Leopold was a community partner potential where naturalists might come into the school to work with the students. Students may also go there. So it's more a matter of partnership rather than an internship.
I think that comment was made in just the broad spectrum of all the things that we looked at as models before we zoned in on one that would work for this district.
Because we do that now through DECA in the high school. True. You know,
And
so
you could think of it as like an age-appropriate internship, just like as the language. So the idea, just the point being that partnership and that kids are seeing this is a real-life application of my interests, because at very young ages they have their own passions and they can see, oh, this is fun to see how this is being done in the community. They're not, doing like slave labor as an intern, but they're actually going in a more intense way than you might traditionally think of, maybe at younger ages, so they see how this knowledge applies or can get excited about whatever their passions are.
it just seems like a lot of mights and maybes and lots and potential, and without narrowing it down. So I don't know. It concerns me.
Given the structure and the format of our work, our main goal this summer was to look at all of the mights and maybes and possibilities and narrow them down to a range that still dovetailed, fit together into a cohesive picture. But yes, it's still very out of focus. It's still very blurry, I should say.
Right.
There's an amorphous lot of potentials. We developed this stem cell line.
Yeah, in this piece in particular, I think that's true, because to go too far into the community aspect of it, even with Aldo Leopold, Virginia's like on the edge of her chair, like hoping this school was open right now. But to go too far into that, I was actually the one that said to the task force, the community task force, hold on before you get too many more community organizations involved, because if this school doesn't go forward, they're gonna be out there going, what happened? And so there are lots of ideas around what that could look like, as Peter was alluding to. And the idea of a true community school where community is involved, like you were talking about, in the school and back out to the community and integrated into the whole school model, not just a separate piece, that has only been touched on the surface, because we haven't gone any further to really get those community partners in and talk about what it could truly look like. So definitely that's only been a surface blush look at what could happen with community.
Because it seems to me like we're bleeding money while we're doing that. And it seems to me too, if it doesn't go forward, we still have an elementary school in Cottage Grove. We still have an elementary here in Winnequa that can pick up the pieces. So.
Do you have more questions?
No, I'm good for the moment.
Susan?
Well, I was just thinking that I would think that's part of the next piece, is that if we do decide to approve this going forward, that's the time when that level of planning would take place. Not in this first step. First step was more exploratory and give a shell of the idea. I guess the other question I had, and thank you for the very comprehensive presentation, and I think you did a nice job with all the materials you've developed, and it does answer a lot of questions, and it makes it, I think it's helpful in terms of explaining it to people. When we go forward, I guess, has thought been given yet, or will we be able to see sort of an outline of what the plan for involving our staff as it goes forward, since now we'll be in the school year? Will this entail release time, and if so, to what extent, or are people committing to doing a combination of some of that and some of their own time, or?
Yeah, that's a critical question, and that's something I need to address at the next meeting. I don't know that I will have the exact plan, but we certainly need to address, and start to answer that question.
It's a lot of time, yeah,
It
and I'm
is.
just,
Yeah.
Susan?
I would just add quickly too, when Camille Zanoni was at Aldo Leopold, we met through the Education Foundation. Again, these are the people where we can't afford to actually buy this program in the school district. So we were reaching out to find out how the foundation could do that. And again, they already have set this up in a way that what we've been trying to do, Jeff, is put our students into Aldo Leopold. So when a kindergarten teacher came and said, can we take a field trip, can we get a grant for that, the foundation turned around and said, we're gonna send all the kindergartners, this is really important. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. You know, Susan called it pilot. I like the word incubator, but when you go to these innovation programs and you can see things, so again, that to me is taking that, this program might be able to take that next step that we haven't been able to as a school. And I think another really good example is we do gardens in our school district. So there right now are people in the farmers market arenas who are actually our students. We're reaching out to have students, elementary students, I'm talking about 3, 5, and 7, involved in the actual picking the produce, figuring out what it is, it's a 3-year-old weighing the tomatoes, not that you want to let that happen, but that's the kind of thing you guys were talking about that day. It was amazing. So I think we talked about maybe taping your meetings, we weren't able to do that, but I think the more we as a board have an opportunity to listen, you might hear some stuff that's intriguing, that stimulating and exciting to us.
How many kids do we have 4K through 8 in our district? Approximately.
2,100.
That would sound about right.
It's gotta be 2,100.
So when-
900 in the high school.
Right.
Right. So when we're talking responses of like 300, you're talking about 7%-ish, right? So when you get an 80% of 7%, you start to. I just want those numbers to be a little more realistic.
Well, those are 2,100 students, but not 2,100 families. We had 300,
Right.
so the number of families would be.
1,033.
Thank you.
1,033.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so how many, I
So-
have to go back.
So the survey was sent to 1,033
33, we got how many responses?
350 responses.
300. So,
That's pretty good.
it's pretty good, but you're also talking, you're representing a small amount of people.
Susan?
I guess the other point is, though, the target number here is 100 kids, and as they pointed out in the survey, we have more than 100 kids interested so far. Now, I realize these parents weren't committed in stone at this point, but there clearly is substantial interest, and that's a question I've had, is what do you do if there are many more kids that want to be in the school than you have room for? I assume a lottery type thing is the answer, as is usually what's the case with Moist Armando, for example. I know every year they've got a waiting list, and that's just how that works. So I guess I think again, as a former teacher in the district and as a parent of 3 kids, for one of whom the structure of the traditional school did not work well in the elementary years particularly, I think this is, I continue to think this is very exciting, a very exciting opportunity to offer to our elementary and middle school kids. And I look at the kids, and when I would go to the MG21 graduations over the years, for a while there were students I had in class in middle school, and my reaction was always to be very grateful that they had that opportunity, because it was very clear to me they were struggling in the traditional setting. And I always thought how wonderful if those kids could have had that kind of structure earlier, so that school for them would have been a much more positive experience all the way through. I mean, the reason I pulled my own son after first grade was because he came home kind of having headaches. I'd seen too many as an mostly 8th grade teacher, enough really bright, creative kids over the years for whom the traditional structure just didn't work well, that I thought, all right, this clearly is not working. I'm not going to have my son in this setting for a while. And which is why I sent him to Wingler School, which was a progressive sort of project-based type school. And that, again, is not an option that everyone has. And that's why it delights me to think that we might be able to offer that within our own district to kids, so that we wouldn't have to lose them to the, wouldn't have to lose those kids to the district. So we'll have to have that discussion next week, but I think it's very exciting, and I appreciate all the work you've done.
I have a couple questions. The survey, did you allow comments? Or actually, you alluded to the comments. Those aren't in your report. Could you put that together and send it to us, please? That was one. The other thing is, Peter, you mentioned the Slack
Yeah.
workspace.
Yeah.
Where you have all your research
Yeah.
put up. Can we get access to that, please?
Heather would probably be able to do that.
I believe does the board already have access?
Not specifically.
Okay.
No, we had other documents, we didn't have the.
Okay.
Okay, so, okay. To keep talking about the innovation zone, innovating for school districts, and one of the things I've talked to some, what I'm looking for is an example of a model, existing model, in which that works, where we have an independent school of some kind that is successfully innovating and transferring information, transferring knowledge, transferring practice, for example, to school districts. I've talked to the folks over at Clark Street, and they say, oh, well, that's not really happening. And I'm wondering if you guys looked at a model in which that actually happens successfully. In your research, did you come across that model?
I can speak to that a
Sure.
little bit. I'm Kelly Kay, and I'm one of the ISN consultants. And I used to work at a charter school in Heartland, Wisconsin, called Heartland School of Community Learning. That was very much similar to the school that's being proposed here. Some differences and some similarities, but we had a school that was 3rd through 5th grade multi-age, and it was within a 3rd through 5th grade elementary school. So we had the same principal, and then we had this charter school option, and then the more traditional classrooms as well. After we were in existence for a couple of years, some of the things that we were doing in our school were kind of seeping into what was happening in the other parts of our whole population of our school. So one of the things we had was an environmental partnership, and we went outside every Thursday, rain or snow, whatever it was. And the next year, the whole science program was all developed in that area that we had worked on in the Ice Age Trail. They got an environmental person come in, I think it was through a grant. And so I think one of the things was the teachers were just much more open to what are the possibilities, and then how can I write grants for that? So they would see some of the things that we were able to get through the grant that we had and say, oh, that's something we can do too. This is how it would look in fruition, and here's how we can apply for some of those things as well. So the whole science program transferred to a model where they were out doing environmental education. Our school, outside area became a school, like a national school forest or something, and the traditional classroom sort of took that over. Another thing that we did is we had a real focus on technology. That was one of our pillars. And so the iPads that we used, the programs that we were using, the things that we kind of piloted in our space, led way to another kind of option in our school district where they had digital classrooms. So it kind of became this thing where now all of a sudden there's all these different options in our school based on some of the things that we piloted in our program that other people could take pieces of and say, oh, you know what, I don't want to go full into project-based learning, but that technology piece really would work for some of our kids, and that became another option. That environmental piece really would work for some of our kids, and that became another option as well. So,
is there documentation and research on that, or I understand your experience. It sounds very valuable, but is there documentation on that?
So Colleen's story in Heartland is a very similar story to many of our partners in the Innovative Schools Network, in that a school starts something that's innovative, and then you start to see similar things happening in other schools within the district, or even in many cases, like Waukesha is a good example of a larger school district that started with some small things and now they have multiple charter schools and a magnet school and programs within, at North High School, they have multiple offerings within their school that aren't charter schools. That's more the story that we'll see, because in general, when charter schools get started, it's not an explicit understanding that they are to impact the other schools. Federal charter school grants state that explicitly, that they should. That's one of the outcomes, but there isn't anything within the charter grants that say, and how are you going to impact the rest of the schools in your district? And so there isn't really research or data that I know of that could implicitly state that that's happening. We see things like what what Colleen is describing, and I could tell you many districts where that's happened. In fact, districts that have gone fully charter, like the Highland Community School District. Now they're a full charter school district. Montello, charter school district, because they started doing charters and they just expanded until their whole district became charter, which just seems really odd. Like, why would you have a whole district be a charter school district? But they are. So that's how that happened. And if you remember when I met with you last time, the innovation zone concept is that small ideas start in classrooms. Sometimes the whole school transforms into a whole innovative thing like this we're talking about. And other times it's just great ideas happening in classrooms. I can hardly keep up with all the things Sarah is talking about doing this year, for example. So those are innovative ideas, but to think about scaling what MG21 is doing, for example, to the whole high school, while appealing in some ways, it's also impossible to think about doing that. It really is at that scale, and not appropriate for all students. So I think we don't have implicit data that I could share with you on that, and I don't know of any national data that would truly give an answer to that question.
My next question is, have you spent a lot of time thinking about the governance model of a charter versus just a, I don't know, was it a choice school in the district?
So no.
No, okay. And
No.
my question would be, is there anything that you see at this point that requires a charter rather than the district just setting up a school along these lines?
Yeah, our organization.
And I'll tell you why I asked that in a moment.
Okay,
but go ahead
our
and finish
organization task force touched on that and didn't go too far with it.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because there are pros and cons of each. You know, the biggest pro to having it be a charter school is that the legislation allows for certain autonomies in charter schools that they don't allow for in a non-chartering school. They aren't
And the
huge
question
autonomies, but
the question would be, of the sort of this program you have designed, does any of that design cross those areas where you don't already have flexibility?
the only thing would be probably right now, because remember we're only this deep in a really big glacier, iceberg, whatever you call those things, iceberg. So we're just skimming the surface right now, but I think right now the biggest thing is the days and hours of instruction, so the schedule.
The schedule.
Yeah. And just autonomy from what the district might be doing with some of the curricular pieces. You hear quite a few differences in curriculum, so that would be the other piece that I think the charter would be.
But those were things that the district has the flexibility to work with, correct?
Yep.
I don't think that's the reason I asked that is that there's a 27-page document of principles and standards that we are required by law to follow when it comes to granting a charter. And it occurs to me as I go through this that the bar, it's a very high bar to establish that. Not that I'm against high bars, but we have limited time and limited resources. And the path to implementation might actually be substantially easier if we don't go with the charter route, because you don't have to get over this particular high bar.
I think that's true. I mean, since Act 55, I haven't seen one district that has authorized their charter under the new major thick piece of doctrine, and we were waiting for the DPI to give us a sample contract, and they don't have one. So I would agree that when you look at what the new requirements are for authorizers, in this case the Monona School District Board of Education, the bar is very high. I completely agree.
There's a very strong accountability piece where you have to specify in the charter exactly how you're going to be held accountable.
Yeah, completely agree.
Okay. And it seems to me that particularly if we're trying to be flexible and trying to innovate, that might actually be you're going to have to set something up very sort of rigid in advance.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, one consideration, and Dan and I have talked about this a little, and I mentioned it to you last time as a group, is the state is still hoping to get a federal charter school grant. And if that's true, I would, in the district were to apply and receive such grant, that would really help with continued planning, just like the grant that MG21 received initially.
Yeah.
So that might be one reason to do it, and then you'd have some funds to help you create those documents as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Create those standards.
Right.
Those are my questions. Anybody else?
Well, I guess that Well, I think part of what I was thinking is, to me, it's sort of a bonus if some of the aspects of the school, I mean, we've already heard some of the teachers say from the work they did this summer, they're hoping to bring some pieces back to their classroom, I think, and that's kind of what I assumed might happen. I think that's great. To me, the point of this, providing this separate school, whether it's a charter now or whether it's some other structure, is not so much that it necessarily will carry over, because I think that's correct. That to look at high school programs where we have certain numbers of credits and certain numbers of subject areas, and there's certain things that have to be taught, is very different, and I don't think is necessarily a good fit, and that's the whole point. I mean, the whole point of creating a separate school is because you can't really do it in a larger school in general. You can do pieces of it, and I guess I wouldn't want to go into this thinking that that's a necessary thing. I think if there's an outgrowth such as the kind you described, that's great. But I don't think it's an expectation necessarily that would happen, because the whole point is to serve, frankly, we serve a lot of kids are served quite well by our current traditional structure, and they aren't necessarily asking for a different structure. It works for them. And would some things maybe work better? Maybe, I don't know, but I don't think that necessarily has to happen. I'm also wondering, because we just approved the MG21 charter, again, fairly recently.
It was
prior to this
prior
act.
to Act 55.
So I assume we'll be looking at doing that again, so I'm wondering, I don't really see what the difference would be. I mean, now we have an elementary one, we're still gonna be having, you guys are gonna have to come up with the charter under the new rules too.
Yeah.
So to me, that's not an exclusionary piece either.
No, it's just,
Right.
you should,
It's all the work.
you
It's
should
all the
look
work.
at this.
Right, right.
That's what should happen.
I will.
You should look at
It is
this.
shocking.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, and I guess the other thing is,
I'm sorry, go
well,
ahead.
do we know any more about the timing of that federal grant possibility, or?
They're still
so
hoping
just
to
talking about it?
know by mid-September.
Okay.
Which probably
Just
means
curious.
October.
Yeah, or November, or whatever.
If you ask me, there's a certain sort of schizophrenia in what you're presenting to me, because there's part of, well, we're gonna innovate for lead innovation, and we're gonna serve a student population that's not well served by traditional schools. I do see there's some bit of a difference of those not working together, because if you can't innovate with those students, the things, I mean, if you're serving students that aren't served by the traditional schools, and you're doing things that serve those students, and by definition, they aren't useful in the or so useful in the traditional school. So there's kind of a sort of a conflict, I think, between those two missions and goals as you express them. And I don't know how that resolves itself in the end. I attended the first meeting, and I was, I love the enthusiasm and the ideas that were generated. That process. We as a school, we have all of these students to look at, and I think that going through that process, even though the people were there, was useful, because you said you're taking ideas and thoughts back to the classrooms. And sort of my thought is we should be doing this district-wide also, having sort of these conversations about what from the ground up, what is it that if we put on our thinking caps and take off the restrictions, what is it that we can think about doing to serve all the students? And I want to thank everybody who came and participated in this. I think there was a lot of good work and a lot of good ideas. Together. Jeff?
To whoever. On the frequently asked questions, the FAQs, it's on number 17, the charter school would be a public school, but then the MGSD and would be funded in the same way. That's fair. But funded in the same way means we don't have much money. So if we have a principal in the charter school, that's 2 teachers we can't have in our other schools. It says, would busing be available? Yes, we have busing. But now you're talking another expense that's going to...
Buses already come here, though, for us.
So we want to put pre-K through 8 with the high school seniors from Cottage Grove to drive.
Typically, the buses come into
Right.
the high school, and then they get on the
Right.
one bus. But I think there's a way that we could do it
We could
creatively.
because
maybe.
pre-K, we
Yeah.
kind of do individually by their houses.
Right.
Now, if you're driving 50, 40 kids from
Right.
Cottage Grove, that's not we'll just sneak that in our back pocket, right? But lunch be available, yes, that's also an expense, because we don't have lunch right now down there, right? I
But we
mean,
do have lunch delivery, they
Right.
bring our
Right.
students their lunches.
You know,
We
and-
do have a gym, you know,
Right.
there are certain things that do kind of already exist, that
Right.
would just have to be mutated for
Right.
elementary school.
Right, and which we would still, would be another expense, which would take money away from, this isn't a brand new pot, I mean, we have one pot, and it's hurting, and it's being drained, right? And so, I wanted to point that out on the frequently asked questions there. So. I think there's more of an expense than it's made out to be.
Susan?
Well, I just think, once again, those kinds of, part of your next stage of planning will be coming up with a budget, so we'll see all of that. So if we choose to approve this next stage, even that doesn't necessarily say we're going to approve the final school, because I agree, we are gonna have to look at, okay, what grades levels are these kids actually coming out of? Will we actually have enough kids coming out of the elementary level that we can take an FTE from one teacher so it won't impact the other classrooms? I mean, we can't know any of that until we see the budgetary, what the budget looks like for food and all that kind of stuff. And get a better idea of actual kids that might come in grade levels. And I think that, I assume, will be part of this next plan. Because having just watched the process of I wasn't involved in the process of the middle school charter as it was developed. Dean and Susan, you were to some extent. But I did read the charter, with the application at the end, and there was a budgeting process that becomes part of the planning system, and certainly you do that with MG21. So a lot of these questions, and I've gotten these questions from a couple members of the public too, and that's what I tell them, is we don't have that information yet. And all of that information will, to some extent, determine what our final decision is, I think. Well, whether we can afford it's a big one. I think it really is.
Yeah.
So
I thought
later, that comes later.
I thought that was gonna be part of the $18,000 we
Oh,
spent.
no, I never, yeah.
So,
No,
that's why.
That's after far
It's-
more detailed planning,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, this question is whether this is the best use,
Mhm.
what the cost is, and how, is this the
Sure.
best use of that money?
Sure.
Because there's obviously, there's lots of demands on every dollar that we have.
Because it seems like $18,000 for a survey to 300 people is a big waste of money, but it's.
Can I?
Yeah. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jennifer?
Yeah.
I'm going to take a deep breath. Having participated on the task force, full disclosure, at the invitation of our superintendent, I would like to just witness that the hours you have documented are minimal, I believe, to what actually happened above and beyond and outside of the actual meeting times that we were together, whether it was a subcommittee or the task force as a whole. I know that dollars matter, and I want to somehow, without videotaping, simply, validate that 20-plus people worked very hard over this summer to think carefully, thoughtfully, do research, work together. So from my perspective, the facilitative quality of the work that we had through the Innovative School Network was a catalyst for the level of excellence that came out of our summer work. Had we simply come together with our bag lunches without that, we would never have progressed as far as articulately with the level of research, with the level of background, to arrive at the documents and the information that you have. So again, I know that dollars matter, but for that, what I believe is minimal $18,000, much was accomplished above and beyond even that dollar amount. I think the value our district received goes beyond those dollar amounts. So I just want to, I was there and I witnessed that level and that quality of work, and I appreciate it. On a separate thing, I would like to respond briefly, Peter, to the comment that you brought up that there seems to be a disconnect or a dissonance between innovation and serving our kids. No, go ahead, please, if you want to clarify.
I don't mean an innovation in serving our kids. I mean,
okay.
Sort of the plan says, well, we hear talk with, it was brought up repeatedly, some
Yes.
kids don't learn the traditional
Yes.
environment, and we want to serve them, which is
Yes.
a different mission from innovating to serve the main body of the population, if I want to get clarified. But go ahead.
Certainly. I think it's important as a district to not only maintain the system that you currently have, I think it's important to look to the future and look beyond the models that you have at your disposal. And I think oftentimes there's more than enough work to do to simply maintain what we have up and running. So it's not like we're hanging out with nothing to do. There's a lot of work, lots of work. I do believe that any model is going to fall short for some percentage of students. And if you look at issues of equity, that's unacceptable to me. And I think we need to continually strive towards reaching as many children as possible in every way we can, understanding that that's a really big goal. So for me, the conversations that came out of the Innovative Task Force so spoke to every child deserves a shot. Every kid deserves quality learning. And there are multiple ways of getting there. There isn't just one way, and we have multiple ways, no doubt. If you take a look at second grade instructors and what they're doing in the classroom, no one person is doing it exactly the same as someone else. Is there latitude and freedom in doing an innovative charter that would allow more possibilities for children who are not successful? And I know that's a hard thing for us as educators and administrators to look at critically, but we also see it. We know it's there, that not every kid is successful. Are there other ways we can do it that are viable, right? And that's the question. And if the answer is yes, let's get on it. That's our charge. That's our mission. So I don't have the ultimate answer, but for me, that's how we're going together.
We do have a good model in this district for serving those kids that aren't doing well in the traditional system.
Can I say something about that, actually?
Yeah.
I'm a member of the planning task force.
Sure.
Also, and I think that it's a mistake to think that the strategies that we use to address the needs of children who are not being well served by the current model can also not benefit kids who are doing well in that model. You can see a child who sails through the traditional system because that is their strength, but it doesn't mean that other educational styles will not benefit that child and will push them beyond their borders to maybe approach learning in a way that they wouldn't otherwise. And so I think it really is a mistake to think that addressing one set of needs does not also address another set of needs.
And I would say the same thing is true with MG21. While we do a good job kind of serving students who struggled in the traditional school, I think there are lots of students that are served by our school that are beyond that. And I think that, like Jennifer said, different models just offer more options in the district.
Dean?
I understand that when we're looking at an alternative teaching and learning structure, that a lot of the dialogue is, well, this is going to meet the needs of a child who doesn't, who may be not benefiting from the current program. I think that argument is really a footnote, because these are systems that work, that I can tell you work with all children. It works with the highest performing school system in the world in Finland. And this is the model that they changed from a pure German model of stand and deliver to a model of project-based. They don't use that term, but they basically work with kids all the way from very early on, and it is successful. And their system does not have one high-stakes test, not one, delivered by the state or by the area or the we call the district here at all, until they graduate. After how they graduate from high school and they take a university admissions test. There's not one high-stakes test, and so they are doing very well. And partly the reason they do well, in my judgment, is, as I mentioned to you when I sat in on your last meeting, is that their faculty meetings sound like the last meeting I was in here. there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of discussion, and they do that to help improve the teaching of their colleagues, to start anew, and to suggest ways to address the needs of individual kids. There's everything that happens in that school system is formative, testing or examination and that sort of thing, and they are the schools I were in recently. I remember one day being over there for my living in Latvia, and I visited some old friends, and I went into the school, and they had they were having a whole fourth of the year in which plumbers and carpenters and electricians and that sort of thing were including their time into this and teaching physics and chemistry and measurement and all that kind of stuff, you know, as a part of it. And now they had a way of doing that because they did, but I don't want to see it as a school, an exceptional school that is simply only dealing with people who don't fit in another environment. And I would suggest that it will probably be generally successful. Will some kids not work in that environment? Maybe the independence they would have and that sort of thing. I don't know, but I think a lot of it is the teacher training and the teacher and the collegiality. And what works in those schools that do this are basically the mutual support and collegiality that is built in as a part of the everyday culture and not as planned professional development. Okay.
We're now an hour and a half over our time, and what I'm going to ask, we'll have plenty of time to discuss this in our next meeting. So, what I'm going to ask is if we have questions for rather than debating ourselves, but while we have the people here in front of us, if we have questions for the planning team members, and Susan.
This isn't really going to be that, but it is going to piggyback on these comments. And I am going to say it just because we have some, even though we're over time. I do want to thank you for those comments, and I didn't mean to imply that that's how I think of this. I think it's just very difficult to go into a large school. I mean, it takes, to structure a school like this takes a lot of buy-in from the teachers, first of all. So you have to have teachers who want to teach in this kind of structure. Right now, most of our teachers do not teach in this kind of structure. And having been at the middle school when we introduced expeditionary learning Outward Bound, while it brought a lot of successful things into it, did it totally convert the entire school? No, it did not. And there were, you know, I thought it brought in more good than not in a lot of ways, but there were a lot of teachers who were not comfortable with it. And we never did even try to structure the entire day that way because we couldn't with the number of kids and what we're expected to do. So I think the point is to look at this not also as not an extra, and I'll go back to the comment that Jennifer made at the seminar we went to, that some of us went to, when you said, you know, that we should think of innovation as the main course, not just the dessert. And I think that's the point, is this school, if we do decide to support a charter school, it isn't really an extra, it becomes a part of our program. It's something that we offer. It isn't just a whole separate entity. It is teaching our kids. And some students will feel more comfortable in that kind of setting, just as some teachers will. Clearly, the numbers of teachers that were interested already, and I know from having worked with some of them, they do like the idea of working in this kind of setting. Others are far more comfortable in the setting they're in right now. And then, so I think that's the role that charter schools serve. That's why we have them. Anyway, I think it's important not to lose sight of those kinds of things as we think about this.
Jeff, do you have a question for the planning?
I just want to say one more thing. I don't want to diminish all the work. I don't want to diminish all the work you guys are doing. I appreciate that. I'm having a hard time getting over the fact that we've just talked strategic plan, paying money for that, and our number one goal is to teach to a test that doesn't benefit anybody but politicians who want to punish inner city kids. And in the end, then we're going to put that aside and we're going to take these 100 kids and educate them the way we know research really works. If it was the other way around, if we had 100 kids doing the ACT and everybody else doing this, I'd be all on board. But it's just, I'm having a hard time doing that. So that's where I'm coming from.
Susan?
Mine is actually a question.
Thank you.
Did you hear that? No, there was a comment that was made, and I'm not sure, I'm asking for clarity on this, because I don't think it was intended that way. But basically, the comment was, this was a study in a program that is for students that are not successful. And it was my impression in the meetings, when I watched, that this is truly an opportunity for each and every student who might be touched by this new opportunity to learn in a different manner. Is that
not to point fingers, but I think it was Krista who said, but in a good way, really, that when we were talking about getting information from families in this family survey, one of the things that our group talked about was, even though we had a really high return rate, I don't know what your return rate was on your community survey when you were prior to the referendum, but to have an approximately 30% return rate from families in the summer is amazing. So it tells you how engaged your families are. But one of the things our organization task force talked about, which Krista was part of, is that we want to make sure we're hearing from all families who would be included in this, and those that are traditionally underserved, I think that was maybe the phrase, are often the ones who we don't hear from. And we want to give those families the exact same opportunity as families who are engaged in the process and are typically the ones we are serving, to have feedback. And so we talked about already having community-based listening sessions and feedback sessions and all of these kinds of things that we would want to do to include them, not to specifically aim this school at kids who would traditionally not be served in a regular school, but to make sure they're included just like their peers who are being served in regular school.
And I can reiterate too, and I see it probably the opposite of sort of like Peter's comment. I think if you plan with that end in mind, it's sort of like how you design the innovation. So it's the how, and when you consider, like if you consider innovation in the sense that you're designing it to meet the needs of a student who might traditionally be underserved because of how schools are structured, not underserved because we're not working hard or trying to be innovative in our current programs, but there are limitations. And the beauty of it is when you think of it from an elementary standpoint, is that if you design it with that in mind, not that we're going to seek out students that we think you as a 4 or 5 or 6-year-old might not be successful, but to give families the option, if there are pieces that we know might lead a student to be underserved, or just even groups of students. I mean, we know, Jennifer sort of spoke to it, we can predict who's probably traditionally underserved in our setting. And when you think about the innovation and the how, if you're looking at best practice and looking at what works, and to be honest, there is no separation. There's no innovation for kids who are traditionally underserved and innovation for the rest of the kids. Innovation and best practice is innovation and best practice. So if we have a setting where underserved kids are really going to be or traditionally underserved, we want to get to them before they're underserved so that they're successful. It's that setting that's a good fit for all students and any family. And you know, it's as someone was just saying, it's Susan, part of it's in our menu of options as a district, and that's to clarify sort of what I was speaking to.
All right, any further questions? Do you have a comment?
I have a comment. Just speaking as a special educator who, I mean, this could serve, this is a demographic that I work with that could be a very small part of this proposed school, but it's part of my job to kind of make these round pegs fit into square holes. And what I see this opportunity is as not what hole can I fit this peg into, but what material can I change the hole to be so that this kid or this peg, whatever, can fit into themselves without, and it's just not possible to do that at some level, at all levels, in a large traditional school scale setting. So when I think about Peter's comment of are we innovating or are we trying to serve all kids, to me that goes hand in hand, you know, and I think that's part of, you know, it's a large part of why I'm here today is I want to see not the kid try and fit to the system, but the system be fluid and form-fitting to the kid.
Thank you. Yes?
One comment about the financing, of course, that is a huge concern, and it's something that came up again and again in our research of other school districts and their applications. And a lot of school districts are doing very innovative things to finance these schools, because it's not just a problem for Monona Grove, of course. So, you know, that's something that we saw in our research, touched on, of course, as we said, this is just scratching the surface, but there are a lot of innovative practices going on other than just grants, including the families. You know, service hours, some schools require 20 service hours a year of every family, for example. It's also really huge, they really work to pull the families and the communities in, not only sending 3-year-olds into internships. I'm kidding, I'm the one who was going there. But also, you know, bringing business partners in to help fund. Also, for example, the food issue, food, as you mentioned, that, you know, that's a cost. In some of the schools, they have restaurants coming in and making the meals, financing some of that. They have real business partnerships with the community gardens. Someone mentioned that, you know, that food is being used for this purpose. So, you know, of course, that doesn't finance everything, but there are a lot of innovative things going on there too that I think we could really research and expand upon too.
Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And all the work you did this summer. And why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Thank you.
Yeah?
The interesting thing is,
out in our personnel meetings, I'd say over the last month and a half, that I would highlight. And so to begin with awesome feedback from the admin team from this summer work, that debrief process of looking at the supervision cycle and evaluation cycle and what takes place there, and then looking at the criteria and the rubrics and the indicators that we have in our compensation documents. And a strong feeling that there is duplication and that many of the applications that came through this year in our first run focused so much on teacher practice, which is really attended to in our evaluation and supervision cycle by our building administrators. And so typically the folks who are going to apply, who get the am I ready, the yes you are, you're in a good place, are not going to be people who are deficient in some way or who might be on an improvement plan or have some kind of deficit or gap. So the sense was, let's not duplicate that process and that articulation. And so I think for me, that's one of the biggest areas of change in our compensation document, that actually to apply and to be ready to roll, it's kind of a given that you're doing well in the classroom. So you're going to see some, I think, bigger changes there in that language. So I think that would be one key place that's different. And then particularly between the specialist documents and the educator documents, we were really mindful with Krista and the specialists that were with us. Most of those folks come in with a higher degree typically and with many more years of experience because they've done clinicals and other pieces where that initial educator might not. And so how do you make that equitable, even though it's a real distinction in what you have to do just to be able to get that licensure and certification. So that was another place that it's you're trying to be equitable, but it's not the same. And so how do you accommodate or include just the preparation that it takes to be able to do that job? So that was a distinction that I thought was pretty critical.
Yeah,
How am I doing?
That's one they raised on the committee throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
I mean, they brought that up numerous times,
Yeah.
and they've, over the last.
And the last piece I would share is, I don't know if we're all remembering that specialists did not have the opportunity to apply last year for level 4. And so that sense of, can we get this on board, is particularly sensitive, I think, for those folks out in our schools. Okay, I'm done.
Thank
But those
you.
were
And
the.
let's clarify what
Yeah.
Jennifer just said. It's a really important point. So since specialists did not have an opportunity to apply last year, but the recommendation is that any specialists who apply and are approved for the level 4 this year, their salary increase would count for the current year. It'd go back retroactive to the beginning of this year because they didn't have that opportunity last year.
Whereas otherwise it's the following.
Yeah, otherwise it's the following, right.
That makes sense.
But I think also a lot of the discussion is particularly with the specialist, but it's also apparent with hard-to-hire teacher categories as well, is that we're going to, in the teacher shortage issue, we'll probably be less impacted by that than other districts. But one of the things, Susan, I think we heard at the conference that we were at around the state, is increasingly shortage of teachers, and I guess some districts generally, but particularly science, math, tech ed, and that sort of thing. But this is also a critical case, virtually with many of the specialist kinds of things, and not only because perhaps the why would I want to go work in a school kind of atmosphere, I think, which is drawing teachers back, but we're also competitive there in non-educational settings, and many of the categories can be employed in clinics and so forth. So I think eventually dealing with the hard to hire are going to create concerns about morale, and we saw that in this last go-round where I've been here for, 12 years, and we got people here that just hired 3 or 4 years ago. But a lot of those happen to do with aberrations of what year the district had money and years they didn't. But it's also scarcity areas, and I think it's going to be a reality that we're just going to have to. Unless you can see it, I don't see any way we can build that into a nice, clear framework. We're just going to have to deal with it and make the adjustments and as much as we can.
So we had a lengthy discussion about that challenge. There is nothing in this plan new though to address hard to fill or high needs areas, other than an asterisk saying we need to address it at some point.
The DPI just released today new relaxed teacher licensing standards because of the pressure they're getting from school districts over shortages.
Well, yeah, they're hiring back for retirees or
There was a whole
people who were once certified. It's just making it easier for them to get back in.
Any other questions, comments? We're not here to take action. We're just here to talk. Okay.
But I think to emphasize what Jennifer just said, Dan, I think his internal committee reported that when they were doing the evaluations of applications last year, that the applications were exceedingly or unnecessarily lengthy, particularly justifying the teaching piece. And since the principal criteria is leadership, the recommendation coming through here is to let the committee judge the teaching factor with reference, I guess, informally, or perhaps formally, but general recommendations on the teaching qualifications would stand alone, and that the application would really be the writing would be applied to the leadership factor. So what we're talking about is basically having no wordage on teaching. Is that correct, Nan?
Yeah, on classroom instruction.
I think so, on the classroom instruction. And my presumption is that that would be also the case for the specialists as well. So my presumption then would be that the leadership factors would does that increase the expectation that be well written?
I think so. No,
and that sort of thing, because if that is the determining criteria, because to some extent we really said that the teaching qualification was the language in here now is the teaching qualification for level 3 is roughly the same as level 4, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess the most important thing
Did we do it
is
right?
to read that last page and a half about the 16-17 transition. Make sure that makes sense to you.
4 nodding, 5, 6
And
nodding
even
heads.
if you read it again after tonight, any feedback, please email me between now and next week.
Which document is that?
So the one that we just uploaded it last night, the committee just met Monday. So it's the one, I think you titled Teacher Compensation Plan Draft with yesterday's date on 8/23/16. So that would be the one that has the highlighted change based upon Monday's Personnel Committee meeting.
Well, one of the things that Dan, maybe I just ought to mention something that we didn't take action on, but Dan, in meeting with him with regard to this, we explored the idea of what about a direct application to the state, because basically the master teacher application asks all that rubric is the master teacher application in the state system, and the specialist has the same thing. I did not meet with the people on the, at DPI, I did not meet with the people that are dealing with the specialists, but I did meet with the teachers. And basically, they do that, and they have kind of standard reviews for the run-of-the-mill teachers, like English teachers or a history teacher or something like that. But for those that are more less frequent or more unique, they have a process where they refer them to I would guess a team of teachers like that out in the state that will review those applications, a group of people who have been approved by DPI as master teachers in that category. We decided not to go that way. That would take some burden off the review process if we wanted to do that, but we did not even deal with leaving that as an option for them to do. But it's we wanted to keep it internal. So.
And just actually back to a question you had earlier, Susan, one of the documents that is on the board docs, it's the last one, I believe, under the administrative content, and it's titled Teacher Leader Compensation Meeting Agenda and Notes from the summit, the date. Yeah. On there is that does summarize basically what was done. What I need to do is probably just clean up that document into a clear here specifically. And I think that gives you a good flavor of what was discussed and changed.
Okay. Sorry, there's the agenda wasn't flowing. There we go. All right, so we'll move on to the discussion of possible approval of revised extracurricular and ended schedules.
Okay, we're recommending just a single change on the additive schedule, and this came out of discussion, well, it's probably been a discussion for a while, but particularly this summer, and to add an assistant grade level coordinator position. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, what's written in the board docs, but we've had teachers voluntarily leading this work. We think this is important enough work that it should be compensated. And now normally with these types of changes, we would have probably discussed them with MGA during meet and confer and so on. I did again personally communicate with them, and of course they're supportive of any additional opportunity for teachers. So.
Comments? So I'd like a motion for approval of the revised extracurricular and additive schedule for 2016. For a second?
Second.
Moving second. Discussion. So this is easy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I didn't hear any ayes.
I said aye.
Yeah, I said
Oh,
aye.
okay. It was really quiet.
Hello, over there.
I was
Next
gonna say that
is
the table was kind of
discussion.
zoned out, it seemed like.
discussion of possible approval of the 6603 agreement with McFarland School Districts regarding MG21.
Again, I think hopefully it's self-explanatory. This is something we do annually. We just happen to have a specific agreement with McFarland that will have up to 4 seats for their students. At this point, we only have 1, but it does require a contract approval every year. So,
Okay.
and the student name is in the contract. That's why we have our administrative contract.
Dean?
I'd move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. My question is, why is this a question for us and not for the MG21's charter board?
Because it's still, well, Jared can answer better, but it's still, the money still flows through our district budget.
Okay.
Yep, so we're actually, the 6603 and McFarland are the two. We make the agreement because they have to file, we submit the DPI reports.
Okay.
They're all students. If somebody drops out of MG21, they're our student, are they not?
Well, the 6603, we can send them, they go back to McFarland. That's what's different between open enrollments and the 6603.
Yeah, this is a different in that case, but an open enrollment student
Is ours.
doesn't go back to,
Yeah, we had some other question last year that seemed weird that we had to approve what we did, just as a.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, not such a big deal, future agenda items.
Okay, I gave you a hard copy tonight, and you've seen it before, the tentative meeting schedule for the entire year. There's not any significant changes on it, but I just wanted to give you that, just to point out, it's the same thing that you received by email from me a week or so ago about potential items for board workshops. And I apologize, you received a million emails about trying to find a date. In hindsight, we should use Carrie's suggestion, just done the doodle, yeah. And then.
I tried to say to nice, like, have you ever heard of doodle?
We have, we use it often.
I
So,
I just thought I had to start there.
So essentially, I think basically through all those emails, we pretty much confirmed that there aren't any dates that all 7 board members can attend in September. The reason I gave you this document is that based upon the tentative agenda items we talked about, I think it is still important we really try to meet in September and not put it off till October and get backed up. So I would like to propose an alternative that was not out there through email. Our next regular board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 13th. The reason it's scheduled for Tuesday is because we have the state superintendent's conference that begins Wednesday. It's co-sponsored with DPI and WASDA. It's right here in Madison. There are some activities that happen that Wednesday evening, but I think because of this, it's not at all a problem if I skip that and attend here that Wednesday. So that would be an option that I would throw out, is that we could perhaps move our regular meeting back to our normal Wednesday and do the workshop on Tuesday, or leave the regular meeting on Tuesday and do the workshop Wednesday. I don't think we can try to do both the same night. Initially, I thought that might be an idea, but I'm afraid that we're gonna run out of time.
Can you have a show of hands of who's available on September 14th? Okay, so it's pretty close, but.
Oh, we didn't see.
But how about you guys over there?
I don't know,
Yeah,
I have to
Wednesday's
look
not good
here.
for Jennifer.
Yeah, the class.
Sorry about that.
What about Thursday, 15th?
Well,
I think that was one of
What
the
date was that
strong-
again?
Oh,
September.
Let's just do them, again, you keep throwing stuff at us, but I've already told you I can't.
I can do the 13th or 14th.
So can I, but Jennifer can't do the 14th. And we already have a school board meeting scheduled on the 13th, too. What about the 15th?
You're right, maybe we didn't throw that out because
What about the 15th?
well, it's still during your.
and I guess probably miss Wednesday or Thursday, doesn't really matter. It's,
I have a commitment on Thursday, the 15th, speaking at a pharmacy group meeting that night.
So you're not available?
It might be that we can't get everybody, sometimes that happens.
Well, I think this is too
Well,
important.
for a workshop, I think we have to have everybody. For a regular board meeting, maybe not. So maybe we should have the board meeting Wednesday night, as you suggested, and have the workshop on the Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So who can't make the Tuesday workshop?
Jennifer is committed to a class that's on
Yep.
Wednesday night, so
That's
we
right.
keep
Right.
throwing out Wednesday nights.
Right.
Also, our board meeting night, so.
it is a
we
regular
can't-
board meeting night, sorry.
It's a regular
Right.
board meeting night, so
Yeah,
that's
I
twice
get
a
it.
month.
But
She
on the other
works it
hand,
out.
I get it. Do it. Do what you gotta do.
Any other
On the other
thoughts?
hand, I don't know if we, yeah. Well,
Slash
so
dates.
Thursday doesn't work for you. Monday.
The workshop on the 13th was your suggestion, was it?
Well, it was a possibility.
No,
but
we've moved our board
We've
meeting to the
moved our board
13th
meeting.
already. We have a meeting on the 13th, one way or another.
Right.
We need
Right.
a second meeting that week. Who can make the 14th? Hold up your hand if you can make the 14th.
I think I can.
Susan?
Oh,
Who can, if you, hold up your hand if you can make the 15th. I'm sorry, hold up your hand if you can make the 15th.
15th?
And Carrie,
I don't know.
so you're making me choose between Carrie and Jennifer.
well, what if, because the class starts at 5:30, right?
Okay, thank you.
I'm
Put
just
your
trying to think
shit
if there
down.
was a way to start the
When you
workshop later.
8:30.
Oh, not
Or
till 8:30.
earlier. Is there any
Oh,
way,
no,
I
if your
know,
class starts at 5:30.
And I-
Oh, I
is there
see.
any way we could start the workshop at 3:30? Carrie?
On Tuesday,
You mean, and then have.
and then have a board meeting afterwards?
No, not the same day.
What's the board workshop, what do we do in the board workshop?
Doing that,
I was talking about the
Superintendent
14th on
evaluation and
Wednesday, so
compensation
Jennifer's
and
class.
superintendent
She's saying
evaluation
that-
process, the evaluation process in general.
yeah. Well, I was thinking that too
Those are
for a
the things
You
that
workshop.
know, I'll make
on there.
muffins and
This
bring
is
coffee.
gonna be a little bit later than that.
That's
You
not
know.
a,
For 2 or
how
3
long is
hours.
that?
Yeah,
It'll
well,
take a
that's,
while.
I
Think?
don't know.
that's the other option is, what about like
No,
a
no, that's
Saturday
our
morning for a
expectation.
workshop? I mean, if we just did if we limited it to a couple hours and it was
Saturday morning, the 10th?
Can't do that, but the 17th, that could be.
I can't do Saturdays.
You can't do Saturdays, Jeff?
No.
You're asking about the 10th?
No, we're not gonna do a Saturday, Jeff can't do it.
Okay.
Okay.
My,
Gotta ask.
my sort of inclination then is to do it on a regular board meeting night, which is a Wednesday.
And that was 6
Because
to
that's the
8
way it
was the
works.
time.
We'll have a board meeting and the,
What are any hours better for you, Jennifer?
No, not on a Wednesday, sorry.
So your plan is on the rather regular board meeting nights to?
Go to my
kind of
board meeting.
general- Okay, in general, but.
Which would you rather miss, the board meeting or the workshop? We're gonna talk about the evaluation process for the superintendent and the administrators.
Okay. Pick a date and I'll work.
Well,
Thank
we
you
have a
for
choice of
trying,
putting,
but-
the choice is putting the board meeting on Wednesday and the workshop on Tuesday, or leaving the board meeting on Tuesday and having a workship on Wednesday.
Did we completely rule out Sunday, September 11th? I know it's Grandparents' Day, big holiday, or Sunday, September 18th.
I can't do it on the 11th.
No.
I mean, if we've completely ruled out all weekends, I mean, my Sundays are open the entire month.
Okay. Let's do the doodle poll for the whole month and see if something comes up.
Is there any
If
way
not-
we could start the workshop at 4?
What about,
On the 14th?
How about the 31st of
That doesn't
August?
help,
That's a
that doesn't
Wednesday.
help Jennifer.
30th, how about the
Tuesday
30th?
starts at 5:30, given an hour.
Does that help? Wait, hang on a second, she said that any time you know.
How about the 30th of August for the workshop, would that be good? That's a Tuesday.
That's back to school night at Cottage Grove School.
Oh,
I personally
okay.
have to be
Yeah,
there.
right,
Yeah. Sure.
It's okay.
All right, and the bias will be towards the 14th, but we can,
Okay.
let's try the doodle poll thing, and let's see if
Let's
anything
see.
comes up for September. So everybody's required in the next day
Okay.
to do that.
We can help
And
anyone
then
who
we
needs
can-
help filling out the doodle poll.
Joyce can't make it.
Jean?
Yeah, and is the doodle coming
When is it?
I
as
would
an email?
respectfully request, I will have a doodle pull out tomorrow that each of you check your email tomorrow afternoon
Okay.
and reply.
Okay.
That's
Thank
good.
you.
what was the name Dean, what was Dean pointed out?
Or just call
Embarrassed and humiliated in public.
It's not the only one, I think.
We're still in an open meeting, people.
Yes, yes.
Well, it
All
does
right.
seem to me that people should check their board email daily, one
Yeah.
time.
I know, but
at least, just for the-
That's two things, I check it, but and reply is a whole different
That's
story.
right.
Well, and reply.
That's,
Please.
sometimes that doesn't.
Okay, it's after 10, here we go.
Okay,
Here we go.
so we're gonna do that. Anything else for future agenda? No. Okay.
Enough already. Thank you. No.
Well, we just discussed future meetings, the rest on the list.
I
Any
move to
other?
adjourn at 10:10.
Do we need, just before we do that, do we need to talk about another date for another one? We talked about another
Well,
workshop.
yeah, because Jeff, we just got an email from you saying, after we'd all agreed to Tuesdays, saying that Tuesdays aren't good for you. So do we need
I
to
didn't know we all
do it for
agreed to
everything now, or
Tuesdays.
what? I mean, I don't know.
We didn't
How many
know.
board
We had-
workshops do we
We
need?
didn't know. Let's
Yeah.
take, hang on,
As many as it
stop.
takes.
We had
We
two
agreed
others.
Stop.
Because
We agreed to
Who
three.
agreed to that?
We talked
all
about
did.
it.
Was I
Okay.
part of we all?
Let's do the doodle poll for this one. Let's let this one work on the scheduling, learn from the experience, and then we'll work on the time and date for the next workshop, because we have to talk, because that involves administrators, next one involves administrators, and a
Right.
bigger
Right.
pool of people.
So
So
we need commitments.
let's get this one under our belt, and then we'll work on the next, schedule the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. And that one, we're going to be a little less flexible about the scheduling because it involves a lot of other people.
Right.
So
Right.
we'll have to set up a date that fits their schedules, and then if you can't make it, you can't make it. But we'll try to accommodate as much as possible.
Peter, again, if we start talking about dates, at least with the board now, that puts us 2 weeks ahead of people making commitments. If you don't wanna do it, you wanna.
Are you prepared to sort of make commitments in terms of
No,
what the
I'm
administrators
saying
can make?
give
I'm
him
talking to
3
Dan, I'm
dates.
trying to.
Well, we had 3 dates, and do you wanna confirm that those now will not work, or, I mean, we don't have.
I had some, but I'd have to go back and check again.
Okay, let's take that. We will, by email, try and start the schedule for that one too.
For the October.
Okay? For October, by
Does
the
doodle for the whole.
Just
We're
wanted
gonna-
to
Just did dual poll.
We're gonna set the
Dual
dual
poll
poll.
for October, too.
All right,
It's the only way to do it. Mary's-
we've had a,
Sit and do it right now.
No,
It's hard to keep track of 4 or 5 emails.
okay, hold on.
That's right. Just when it's all in one thing, and you start, you can see when everybody's available. Because you're right, people will start making other commitments if we don't get those days locked in. So just do a doodle poll for each
We'll
one.
do that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think Gary had a
Carrie made a motion that we ignored.
How about we come back to that at 10:12? Move to adjourn at 10:12.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
You can't oppose it. Well, you can, but we're leaving.
Wait a minute, did somebody vote against it?
I'll be here a while, I'll wait for
All right, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, this.
Oh, yes.
Keep that.
Right, yeah, I changed it.
Jared?
This was just dated.
This
He was
taxes
up
is like that.
this afternoon. Changed.